infrastructure sitting on top of it, groundwater, structural stability underneath a populated area, and a very practical ceiling on how deep you can dig beneath an active city without causing serious damage. On the surface, you can pour incredibly strong reinforced concrete. You can layer in blast protection. But you cannot manufacture 300 feet of solid granite underneath a capital the way nature already provided it, at a mountain site chosen specifically for that purpose. That distinction is exactly why this particular strike worked as cleanly as it did. Independent analysts spent decades and untold billions on a single bet that if you bury something deep enough, under enough rock, nothing on Earth can touch it. On April 3rd, 2026, that bet was tested twice in the same week, once against a mountain and once against a bunker sitting practically under the streets of Tehran. And what happened during that second test is stranger than almost anything to come out of this entire war, because it wasn't even supposed to happen. It started as something else completely, a rescue mission. And it ended with Iran learning that granite was never really the problem. The problem was what the United States built to answer it. Let's rewind to the moment this actually began, because the sequence matters. On Thursday, April 2nd, 2026, an American F-15E Strike Eagle, call signs Dude 44 Alpha and Dude 44 Bravo, pilot and weapons systems officer, was shot down over Iranian territory. This wasn't some quiet accident far from the fighting. Iran was actively hunting for 2 American aircrew in large numbers with a bounty, reportedly offered for whoever found them first. One of the most dangerous positions a service member can be in. The United States now had 2 of them on the ground, separated deep inside hostile territory during an active war. Combat search and rescue is already one of the most punishing operations a modern military can attempt. You need real-time intelligence on where the enemy is moving. You need fighters to clear hostile aircraft out of the sky. You need attack aircraft ready to suppress ground forces closing in on the crash site. And you need a helicopter crew willing to fly directly into contested, defended airspace to physically pull someone out to... All of it has to come together in hours, sometimes less, before the window to reach a downed crew member closes for good. The pilot was recovered first, in broad daylight, in what Air Force General Dan Kane later called an incredibly brave mission, the rescue. Helicopter reportedly took fire from what Kane described as nearly every armed person in the area, with the trailing aircraft absorbing several hits and crew sustaining minor injuries. President Trump posted afterward that the United States had pulled a badly wounded, respected officer out from deep inside Iranian mountains while Iranian forces were closing in fast, calling it the kind of raid that's rarely even attempted because of the danger to personnel and aircraft. But the weapons systems officer was still out there, alone, hiding in a mountain crevice in the Zagros range while Iranian forces, and by some accounts, local civilians chasing a reward, searched for him. This is where the operation became something the Pentagon later called one of the most complex missions in the history of U.S. special operations. 155 aircraft, eventually involved in recovering a single. American, alongside a CIA deception plan designed to convince Iran the airmen had already been captured and moved toward the coast, buying time while the real search continued. Now, here's where it gets strange. Somewhere in the gap between the first rescue and the second, while American aircraft were already saturating Iranian airspace, while attention was locked entirely on finding one missing airman, Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, received a piece of intelligence that had nothing to do with the rescue at all, according to reporting from Fox News and later confirmed in detail by the Wall Street Journal. Intelligence indicated that a large number of senior Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders were gathered together inside a single underground bunker near Tehran. Think about how rare that actually is. Militaries spend entire careers trying to avoid exactly this scenario. Senior leadership clustered in one place at one time. It's the reason command structures get deliberately spread out. The reason senior officers don't fly on the same aircraft. The reason briefings get split across multiple secure locations. If this intelligence was accurate, it wasn't just a target. It was a chance to remove a meaningful slice of Iran's senior military leadership in a single strike. The kind of opportunity that almost never survives long enough to actually be acted on. Because by the time anyone confirms who's inside a building and how long they'll stay there, they've usually already left. And this window opened in the middle of an active, chaotic rescue operation, with aircraft and command resources already stretched across the same battle space. That's not a coincidence militaries plan for. That's the kind of moment that either gets missed entirely, or they've usually already left. Cooper made the call. And what he called in wasn't sitting on a base somewhere in the region, ready and waiting. It was flying from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, on the other side of the planet, choosing to launch from Whiteman Air Force Base, rather than pulling from aircraft already stationed closer to the region, tells you almost everything about how seriously this intelligence was being treated. A round-trip mission from the continental United States is enormously expensive and logistically brutal. Reporting from the Wall Street Journal put the full round trip at roughly 36 hours, with multiple aerial refuelings across thousands of miles and careful coordination with Allied airspace the whole way. Commanders don't choose that option out of convenience. They choose it because it protects operational secrecy right up until the last possible moment, and because it's reserved almost exclusively for targets considered too sensitive or too fleeting to risk exposing through anything else. Only one aircraft in the American arsenal can actually carry the weapon this mission needed, the B-2 Spirit. And only the B-2 was going to be flying this particular bomb, because of what that bomb was built to do. The GBU-57, officially the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, is the largest non-nuclear bomb in the U.S. arsenal, roughly 30,000 pounds. GPS-guided, engineered specifically to survive smashing through rock and reinforced concrete before detonating deep underground. It's sometimes informally called the mother of all bombs, and it represents decades of American engineering aimed at solving exactly one problem, reaching targets everyone else had written off as untouchable. According to reporting, it can punch through roughly 200 feet of earth or around 60 feet of reinforced concrete before it goes off. It exists because Iran, for years, has been building on the assumption that if you go deep enough, American airpower simply can't follow you down. This wasn't the first time the GBU-57 had been used against Iran either, and that earlier strike is the reason this second one carries so much weight. Less than a year before the Tehran bunker strike in June 2025, 7 B-2 bombers dropped 14 GBU-57s on Iran's Fordo nuclear enrichment site during what the Pentagon called Operation Midnight Hammer, the first time this weapon had ever been used in actual combat. Fordo sat under roughly 300 feet of solid granite near the city of Qom, widely considered one of the most fortified facilities on the planet. American planners had reportedly spent over a decade studying it, running models, dedicating officers to it full-time. One general later admitted publicly that people on the planning team were dreaming about the target at night. Satellite images after that strike showed dramatic craters and collapsed tunnel entrances, but independent assessments later suggested the actual underground damage may have fallen well short of what was initially claimed, and fighting around Fordo reignited months. Later, when the U.S. argued the site still needed to be hit again. That single episode says everything about how hard it genuinely is to verify what's happening hundreds of feet beneath solid granite, even with the most advanced surveillance on the planet. So when Admiral Cooper ordered B-2s toward a different underground target less than a year later, it landed inside a war that already had a complicated, unresolved relationship with exactly this weapon. And this new target came with its own name attached to the broader campaign, Operation Epic Fury, the joint U.S.-Israeli military effort against Iran that had been running since late February 2026, and which by that point had reportedly struck several thousand Iranian targets and degraded a significant share of the country's missile capability. The B-2s arrived over Tehran and dropped their massive ordnance penetrators directly onto the underground IRGC facility. According to multiple outlets citing senior U.S. defense sources, the headquarters was, in the words of one official, obliterated. Separately, U.S. B-1 bombers, call sign Bones, dropped roughly 100 2,000-pound bombs during the broader rescue window, explicitly to keep Iranian ground forces away from the area where American crews were still trying to recover the weapons systems officer. Different aircraft, different weapons, different objectives, all running simultaneously in the same contested airspace without one part of the operation stepping on another. A senior military source summed it up bluntly to Fox News. "We delivered the heat." President Trump later posted footage of bombing in Tehran without specifying exactly when it had been filmed, saying that many of Iran's military leaders had been eliminated in what he called a massive strike on the capital. Whether every commander believed to be inside that bunker actually died is something outside observers still can't verify with total certainty. But by every account available, the underground headquarters itself was destroyed, and Iran's regional command structure absorbed a serious, immediate blow in the middle of a mission the world only knew about because American aircrew were being pulled off a mountainside at the exact same time. And that raises the same uncomfortable question that had already been asked about Fordo months earlier, except now pointed at Tehran itself. If granite and depth couldn't fully protect a nuclear facility everyone considered nearly untouchable, could a bunker under Iran's own capital really do any better? The answer, in this specific case, appears to be no. But the reasons behind that answer matter just as much as the outcome itself, and they say something much bigger about how this entire war has actually been fought. Fordo sat under roughly 300 feet of solid granite, chosen specifically because natural rock resists bunker-busting weapons in a way that poured concrete never fully can. A command bunker built near a capital city simply cannot replicate that. urban construction runs into limits that a remote mountain facility never has to deal with. Existing infrastructure sitting on top of it, groundwater, structural stability underneath a populated area, and a very practical ceiling on how deep you can dig beneath an active city without causing serious damage. On the surface, you can pour incredibly strong reinforced concrete. You can layer in blast protection. But you cannot manufacture 300 feet of solid granite underneath a capital the way nature already provided it, at a mountain site chosen specifically for that purpose. That distinction is exactly why this particular strike worked as cleanly as it did. Independent analysts studying Iran's wider underground network have pointed out something important. The Massive Ordnance Penetrator's effectiveness drops sharply once it's up against various high-strength reinforced concrete and drops even further against natural granite bedrock hundreds of meters thick, the kind reportedly protecting some of Iran's deepest missile facilities. Some assessments go further, suggesting the bomb may simply not be able to physically reach targets buried at those extreme depths, no matter how many are dropped in sequence. One widely cited comparison points to Iran's missile complex reportedly buried beneath the Yazd region, described as sitting under roughly 440 meters of granite, bedrock nearly 300 million years old, rock considerably stronger than anything humans have ever poured as concrete. Against that specific combination of depth and rock hardness, even repeated direct hits reportedly cannot reach the actual chamber, where equipment and personnel are sheltered. Some of these deepest sites are also reported to include their own countermeasures built for exactly this scenario. Redundant fiber optic communications that don't rely on external towers, backup generators buried alongside the main facility, and multiple hidden exits on different faces of the mountain so that sealing one entrance never fully isolates what's inside. Analysts have noted that some facilities have reportedly restored access within roughly 48 hours of a strike, using excavation equipment kept pre-positioned specifically for that purpose. Against that level of redundancy, a strike stops being about total destruction and becomes about buying time, sealing a facility shut long enough to disrupt it during an active war, not necessarily erasing it. But the Tehran bunker never had access to that kind of geological advantage in the first place. It was almost certainly built at a depth, measured in tens of meters, not hundreds, deep enough to feel secure, but nowhere near deep enough to match a mountain. The GBU-57 wasn't reaching some new, previously impossible depth when it hit that target. It was operating well within a range. It had already been built and tested to handle against a target that, however seriously reinforced, simply couldn't match the raw geology that remote sites like Fordow or the reported Yaz complex enjoy naturally. One assessment following the broader campaign put it plainly: destroying. Facilities buried under genuine mountain granite at depths approaching 400 to 500 meters is functionally out of reach for current bunker-busting technology, regardless of how many bombs get thrown at it. But shallower, urban command structures remain very much within reach of exactly the kind of strike carried out against this IRGC headquarters. There's a broader lesson here too, and it goes beyond bomb penetration numbers. American commanders showed a clear willingness to fold a decapitation strike against senior enemy leadership into the middle of an already running rescue mission, almost as an afterthought, made possible by timing and reach. That sends its own message, independent of how deep the bunker actually was. It tells an adversary that, even in the chaos of a narrow, contained operation focused on recovering 2 Americans, U.S. forces retained enough situational awareness and strike capability to seize an opportunity the moment it appeared. Every future Iranian commander now has to treat any American operation, no matter how small it looks on the surface, as a potential prelude to something considerably larger. For Iran, the strategic problem this creates doesn't go away just because Fordo-style depth held up better than a Tehran bunker did. Command and control facilities need to stay close enough to population centers and existing infrastructure to actually function during a war, coordinating logistics, communications, decisions across the entire country in real time. But that same proximity is exactly what prevents those facilities from ever getting the extreme depth and natural rock protection available at a remote mountain site. Every meter closer to Tehran a facility sits, the more it trades geological safety for operational usefulness. This strike showed exactly how expensive that trade-off can become the moment American intelligence and to strike capability line up at precisely the right moment. And Iran isn't standing still in response to it either. The broader war this single strike sits inside is nowhere close to finished, and Iran's response to it has been anything but passive. According to analysts tracking satellite imagery in the months since, several facilities struck earlier in the conflict have shown clear signs of active repair and deliberate hardening, new layers of concrete, packed dirt, and sand being added specifically to blunt the effectiveness of exactly this kind of bunker-busting weapon in any future strike. One site that keeps coming up in that tracking, sometimes referred to as Talokan 2, has reportedly shown construction crews adding fresh protective material over ground that had already been hit once earlier in the fighting. Whether that additional layering comes from simple soil and concrete work or something closer to the engineering used at deeper mountain sites, the message underneath it is consistent. Iran isn't just absorbing these strikes and hoping the next one misses. It's actively redesigning its defenses in real time, in direct response to every lesson this war keeps forcing on it. That's the real through line connecting Fordow to this Tehran bunker to whatever gets targeted next. Depth alone was never the actual variable that mattered. What matters is the specific type of rock underneath a facility, the exact geological conditions surrounding it, and the practical limits of how deep anyone can build near a populated area without the ground itself becoming the obstacle. Those three things together determine whether granite actually protects a target or just creates the illusion of protection right up until the moment real intelligence and a B-2 loaded with GBU-57s show up at exactly the wrong time for whoever's inside.